On a bitterly cold January night in 2022, Boston police officer John O'Keefe was found lifeless in a snowbank outside of 34 Fairview Road in Canton, Massachusetts. His body was discovered the following morning, bruised, battered, and partially covered in snow. According to prosecutors, his girlfriend Karen Reed dropped him off at a house party attended by fellow law enforcement officers. They allege that after a night of drinking, an argument erupted and Reed struck O'Keefe with her SUV, leaving him to die in the freezing conditions. Charged with second-degree murder, vehicular manslaughter while under the influence, and leaving the scene of an accident, Reed has maintained her innocence. Her defense argues she's being framed, pointing to a cover-up within law enforcement and inconsistencies in the timeline and handling of evidence. The case has gripped the public, fueled by viral social media debates and allegations of a botched investigation. As Reed faces a second trial, the quest for justice for John O'Keefe grows even more contentious and complicated.
Live from downtown Dedham, Massachusetts, the site of the Karen Reed retrial, this is Closing Arguments. And now here is your host, Vinnie Politan.
We are live in Dedham, Massachusetts, just down the street from the retrial of the century, Massachusetts versus Karen Reed. It's a serious case. It doesn't get more serious. Murder charges. The victim, John O'Keefe, a former Boston police officer. They were boyfriend and girlfriend, and now she's charged with his murder. Now, like I said, we are live in Dedham, Massachusetts. We've got a live studio audience with us tonight. We will hear from them a little bit later in the program with their thoughts, comments, theories about the case. But I want to start here and talk about cameras in the courtroom. You know what I think about cameras in the courtroom because I work at Court TV. This is our lifeblood. But I think it's significant not just for Court TV, but for the public. Because when we see our system of justice in action, it keeps our system of justice honest. We can see what happens inside a courtroom. There's no secret proceedings. It's open to the public, and when the cameras are there, everyone can see what's happening. Now, in this case, some people are not trusting every branch of the government in the way they proceeded in this case, and there's a bunch of folks. So it's important that they get to see what happens inside of this courtroom, so at the end of the day, we all can understand when and if a verdict happens. There are times, though, where we don't put the cameras on at Court TV. If we're covering a case involving a sexual assault, we're not going to put the camera on the victim. And if we're covering a case and there are underage juvenile children who are testifying, we're not going to show them. Many times a judge will order that we don't show them, and sometimes we just choose not to show their faces because they're children. And today was a day just like that here in Dedham, Massachusetts, in Karen Reed's trial, because John O'Keefe's niece took the stand. So we could not show you what happened. No cameras, no microphones. But don't worry. We had Court TV crime and justice correspondent Matt Johnson inside, and he joins us now with all the details of this extremely big day. Because when we talk about John O'Keefe, this is his niece, but this was his niece who he was raising.
And they were orphaned twice, if you think about it. I can't remember exactly, but I almost think that he did adopt them officially. He was definitely their guardian. And this was such a buildup in this case. You know, they testified last year, same deal, no cameras. But we were waiting for it for days because we didn't expect Buchanan to be on the stand that long.
Right, a little bit long. So what was it like, the preparation and the atmosphere inside the courtroom when the niece took the stand?
So it was very different from the start of the day. The bailiffs in the courtroom reminded us of the court order that no electronics whatsoever. You had to use notepads. They handed out these notepads here and pens.
So you're right, old school. That's the way I used to do it.
Right, and I learned how poorly my penmanship has turned. But anyway, you know, they hand these out, and then there is a moment where they play a clip and set up what we're going to hear in testimony. And let's play it right now because this is Karen Reed in her own words about the relationship.
That was not right. You made it clear to me. I'm never breaking up with you.
Talking right there, saying that, John O'Keefe wanted to stay in the relationship and was not going to dump her. So then there was a moment right after that is played. So it was very powerful. You see the O'Keefe family and a lot of the adults stand up, Vinny, and they walk out. And it almost felt like they were in protest of these minors taking the stand, in this case, the niece. But I got it all wrong, because then you see Aaron O'Keefe and some of the other primary family members walk in with other teenagers, and they sit down. Her friends, and they are there in support for this 17-year-old that is in a white sweater, and she is soft-spoken, and she's doing the best that she can to not look at Karen Read and just answer the questions of the attorney asking her.
Think about what a tough spot that is for a 17-year-old. It's tough enough being a teenager, right? You're 17 years old, you've lost your mother, you've lost your father, your uncle raises you, and then you lose your uncle, and then you're in the middle of a murder trial as an important witness. Oh.
And I'll add to it with that. We'll talk about this a little bit more too, but one of the females in her life, as she's going through adolescence and spends a lot of time with her, she loses her too.
Yeah, absolutely. So what did she say about her relationship with Karen Read?
They talked a lot about the relationship in court, and I have to say that the courtroom was completely quiet. This was a very soft-spoken, well-spoken young adult. She was doing the best that she could, and she was talking about the breakdown in the relationship, and she was asked towards the end, how did she feel towards Karen Read, or how did Karen Read rather make her feel? Let's put this on your screen. These are from my notes. She said, she was asked, how did it feel spending time with this defendant? She replied, it felt like coldness towards me. She was asked, how often would you feel that way? She answered, occasionally. But on cross-examination, which did not last very long.
But there was a cross-examination. Some people were wondering, will they even cross her?
It was David Yannetti. He stood up there, and he was very soft-spoken, a very different David Yannetti than you see with most witnesses, very kid gloves, as you would say. And he was asking her, well, let's paint a full picture here. Karen Read took you to get your nails done, to get your hair done. She would spend time with your homework, with your assignments. She went to prep school shopping for you, with you at least one. Okay, they were just listing all of the things where they spent time together to really paint a full picture of the relationship. And a lot of that was before the breakdown of the relationship, which is alleged by this minor witness.
So let's get to the day that John O'Keefe died. What did she say about that? Because she's actually a fact witness relative to that, because she's the one who's home, right? Because her brother isn't home when Karen Read comes back.
So the brother goes to spend time with a friend, and she goes to bed around midnight, and she had been celebrating getting into the school that she wanted to go to, so it was a big celebration. Everyone was happy about it. And John O'Keefe leaves, and she's just taking care of herself, no big deal. And then she is shaken awake, according to her testimony. Karen Read is shaking her and screaming, and this is at 4:30 in the morning. And this was the exchange. Part of that was Karen Read was, defendant was asked, what did Karen Read say, if anything? And she said, could I have done something? Could he have been hit by a plow? These are some of the things coming out of Karen Read's mouth in the morning. And at one point in time, she hears when Karen Read is talking to other people, maybe I hit him, is the quote that I wrote down from that. And then there was a moment where, Carrie...
And this is, again, 4:30. This is before John O'Keefe is found.
Right.
Okay.
And then Carrie Roberts comes over. You see it on the video. And then Jen McCabe is over there because she was ordered to call Jen McCabe because, remember, Karen Read didn't have that number.
Right.
Jen McCabe is her basketball coach. Long history there. So this was the back and forth on that. The question was, did the defendant ever comfort you that morning? The answer was no. Did she ever come into your room? The answer was no. What was Jen McCabe's demeanor? And then she replied, level-headed. And then what was the defendant's demeanor? She said, still frantic. That's what I wrote down. And there was a point in time where Yannetti said, you're referring to her, once she's back on cross, you're referring to her as the defendant. You've never called her that before. You called her Karen. And then, she softly said yes. I almost had to lean in to hear that answer.
Were there any questions on cross-examination about whether she talked to other people, whether she's been influenced by other people?
No.
It was a nice, soft cross-examination, and just trying to paint, I guess, a more complete picture that there was more to the relationship than just what has happened now, that there was an actual relationship. And what's interesting, though, when we think about John and Karen's relationship, the children were a big part of some of the problems that they were having, some of the disagreements. And that day,
at least by the text messages that were read in court.
Right, yeah. And the Dunkin' Donuts issue the morning of the day John died. So how about reaction today? You're always getting the reaction.
Well, I try, and I was in that courtroom.
Which
and,
is
you know,
important.
I do have to say that there were more than the 10. They allowed other journalists in to view this, which was great. But I was noticing the fact that this witness, the 17-year-old, even when she identified Karen Read in court, she didn't look at her. She didn't look in her direction at all. She only looked at her friends and then the attorney asking questions. That was really telling, if you will. And then outside the courthouse, I asked Karen Read if she wanted to say anything to this witness or her thoughts on the testimony. She told me this, and then we're also going to play what her dad had to say as well.
Okay.
Take a listen.
Any reaction to today's testimony, Karen, or the videos?
I don't have any, thank you. No, thank you. No comment.
Give condolences that morning, and you know, the niece said that no condolences were offered.
I certainly did. I knew John O'Keefe. I had been in his company on several occasions. I was there Christmas Eve. I knew the niece, I knew the nephew, and first thing I did, went in and said, I'm sorry to both John O'Keefe Sr. and Mrs. John O'Keefe, Peg O'Keefe. I mean, you know, that's just common decency, and I would not have overlooked that. And I sat down and had a cup of coffee at the island. And I had a conversation with John O'Keefe Sr., and we were talking, you know, kind of nervous conversation. He said, you know, that they had water damage in the kitchen, and they had repaired the kitchen flooring and the like at a cost of $75,000. He was hurting, and I was hurting for him. And my daughter was crying, and she hugged me, and they were both crying. And the rest I'll reveal if Attorney Brennan wants to call me. I'm on the list, so we'll see if he wants to call me.
Now, again, all the attorneys are under a gag order, so it's
Right.
only Karen Read from her team that is able to speak, and usually, you know, prosecutors don't speak anyway, but they're under the gag order as well. That was a different clip of Karen Read from earlier in this week. She was wearing a powder blue shirt, or a suit, pantsuit today, but she told me the same thing. Same exact thing. She had nothing to say.
She didn't want to say. And again, her father almost challenging the prosecutor to call him, which was fascinating.
He's been doing that a lot.
He's been doing that a lot more. We'll see how that turns out. The defense can call him too.
Yeah.
They're not prevented from calling him. Matt Johnson, great job as always. All right, let's bring in our insiders, folks who practice law here and know the judges, they know the litigants, and they know the way all of this works. Joining us, our Karen Read insiders, criminal defense attorney Joseph Krowski Jr. Also with us, Margaret McLean, former prosecutor and host of the podcast, It's a Crime with Margaret McLean. And longtime Massachusetts attorney Rick Grundy. As I always have to tell folks this story. The first trial I covered at this courthouse, the first big one I ever covered at Court TV, he was the prosecutor and he won that case. He won his last trial on Court TV. And also with us, Wayne Dennison, who won his case on Court TV. Johnny, what was his name?
Depp.
Johnny Depp, right? He represented Johnny Depp. Okay, so great to have you all here. So this is a tough day. This is an emotional day. You've got a 17-year-old. Obviously, we keep the cameras out, but this is important testimony. This is significant.
It is, and I think everyone should know, because there's been some suggestion out there that this is exploiting the niece. This niece was not put under subpoena. What that means to me is that this was a voluntary choice that this niece made to come and testify. And the precondition that would be met, if you're going to call John's niece, is to make sure that she can offer some impactful testimony. And to that end, I think what was most impactful were three things. One, certainly, and give Karen credit, she was a female influence in her life, and it seemed like their relationship was pretty good. But what's more important is the relationship with John, and make no mistake about it, it had deteriorated. It was at the point where John wanted to end that relationship. But more importantly, that night, Karen left a voicemail message indicating she was home with the kids. The nephew was not there. 4:30 in the morning, she wakes up frantically telling the niece that John might have been hit by a plow or that she could have possibly hit him. That doesn't reconcile with her other statements, even as recent as a week ago, that she saw John go in the house.
Yeah, how about that?
Why not call 911 or the police or first responders like Kerry Roberts did?
Yeah, these statements are to me, shocking. That's the first place you're going.
Yeah, I mean, you have that on your plate. You've got to use it if you have any potential way to do so. But as Joe said, when you have a witness in that situation, in that age, the message is only as good as the messenger. So they have to be able to deliver it in a strong, credible manner, and clearly they made the decision that she could. Look what she's gone through in her life. I mean, it was another bump in the road, but it was not one of the bigger ones.
Yeah, so when you talk about victim's family, and this is part of the victim's family, and I have to believe, more so than anyone else, the jury is going to feel the most sympathy for this young lady.
That's why Yannetti has to take it really light. There's no way you do that cross-examination in the way, for instance, Alan Jackson often does these cross-examinations. You got to take it, you get what you want, what you can get, and then you sit down.
Yeah, I think he did a great job as well. But overall, I think it was a bad look for Karen. I'm going to back it up a little bit. They were talking about that trip to, or the niece was talking about the trip to Aruba. And just as a woman, here she is in a relationship with John O'Keefe, yet she goes in and screams about John kissing another woman. And do you really say that in front of 14, teenagers, 14-year-old girl? And I think that was impactful, and it goes to Karen's state of mind, because it shows she can be impulsive and she can, scream, and it doesn't mean she necessarily backed up and killed John O'Keefe, but it's just another piece in the puzzle for Hank Brennan.
Another reason why they want to highlight that, because what is a footnote at this point in time but could be developed into a much bigger argument in closing, is we hear those clips now of what was going on between them, and there's an accusation that he's involved with others, he wants to be with other women. When she wakes up, and I feel like, she passed out, alcohol-induced, she wakes up, her mindset, if she didn't know something, and this is an argument I can see being made, would have been that he's with another woman.
Yeah.
Not.
Well, she is saying that in the ride over with Jen McCabe.
I'm talking about when she's in the bedroom with this young child. She's going right to on the side of the road. That's not where her mind would have gone.
But she's saying it in the voicemail messages to John McCabe, or to John O'Keefe. Those voicemail messages really suggest that he's...
What about those voicemail messages? Do you think that there's a way that they actually help Karen Reed?
In some way. Either she's doing this strategically, or she's genuinely questioning, where's the guy?
Don't forget, she was drinking so much the night before. I'm not sure if she really knew at the time. I mean, I can't imagine that she would just make those text messages up. Oh, I've got to cover myself. I wouldn't buy that, and I don't know if this jury's going to buy that either.
The damaging part of those text messages, though, is, look, sometimes things elicit visceral reactions from jurors. In her state of mind is on clear display quite contemporaneously to the time that John O'Keefe was struck, and she certainly seemed impulsive and volatile and under the influence of alcohol, and a lot of what she was saying didn't reconcile with the actual facts on the ground as they existed, which again was brought home by the testimony of the niece today.
Let me put this out there, because generally speaking, if a family member of a victim is testifying, you take a grain of salt with it, right? Because, okay, they're going to believe this person is guilty, and they're going to shade their testimony that way. Do you think the jury looks at a 17-year-old young woman the same way that you would another family member, someone who's a fully grown adult who might have a little bit of a vendetta and some bad blood connected to the defendant in the case.
Well, I think Attorney Yannetti's last question with respect to the whole defendant thing, that's kind of the pathway they go there. It's not necessarily nefarious, but this has been planted in your mind to say certain things or take a certain slant towards things that not necessarily would have come from your mouth. But everything in this case is very little stands on its own. And she's just another person that's unlikely to be in this broad-based conspiracy who's saying something along the lines of, I hit him, could I have hit him, I think I hit him. So, you know, that's the, all the experts and everything, I still think that's the centerpiece.
Okay.
And one thing I would say is don't forget there's a civil trial coming after this.
Yeah, well, can we get through this first?
Yeah,
Exactly. Can we get through the criminal trial and get a verdict? All right, they're staying with us. That's the great news. When we come back, we're going to dive into some of the evidence about, how about that hair that was stuck to the back of the SUV? Where did that hair travel to? We are live in Dedham, Massachusetts with the retrial of the century.
Court TV's Vinnie Politan with the latest and breaking true crime stories.
Now, let's look at the other side of all of that.
Vinnie Politan Investigates. Tonight, 9/8 Central, only on Court TV. All this week, Vinnie Politan is live from Dedham, Massachusetts for the Karen Read trial.
We'll be on location talking Karen Read with a live studio audience.
Closing arguments. Tonight, 8/7 Central, only on Court TV.
I found one apparent piece of hair on the Lexus.
If you could get in as close as possible, Ms. Gilman. Do you recognize what's in that photograph?
Yes, I do.
And can you share with us what you saw?
This is a close-up photo of the apparent piece of hair on the rear of the vehicle.
What did you do when you saw that, what you thought to be a piece of hair?
I marked it with the tape. I designated it as letter A, and then I asked the Crime Scene Services trooper to take a photograph of it.
All right, folks, we are back live in Dedham, Massachusetts. One hair. You know, I covered a trial out in California where one hair was the key to the whole case. Scott Peterson was convicted of the murder, the double murder of his wife Lacey and their unborn son Connor, because Lacey's hair was on his little boat that he took out into San Francisco Bay where he discarded her body. So one hair can be huge. I want to show you the images here because this is a key piece of evidence for prosecutors. It's the back. You can't really see it from the wide shot, right? You got to really zoom in to see that hair. And when you look at it, it almost looks like a scratch, but it's one hair on the back of the SUV. How did it get there, and why was it still stuck to the SUV? I say that because I want to talk about some hair travel right now. Karen Read allegedly hits John O'Keefe at 34 Fairview, and they say that his hair attaches to her SUV. It doesn't end there. Karen then drives the SUV back to John's house at 1 Meadows Avenue. Then don't forget, Karen leaves 1 Meadows and drives to Jennifer McCabe's house. Karen and Jennifer then drive back to 1 Meadows. Then the SUV is driven again from John's house to Karen Read's parents' home in Dighton, Massachusetts, which is not around the corner. And there's a snowstorm. The weather's not great. You can see it right there. And then police come up and tow it from Dighton back to the Canton PD Sallyport, right? So all that travel, I mean, lots of miles through lots of weather, yet that hair was still there. What is going on here? Still with us, our Karen Read insiders. This piece of evidence is baffling to me. How does one hair stick to the back of the SUV?
Yeah, I don't buy it, and I don't think the jurors will put much weight into it. It just, unless it was frozen on, but still, it's one of those things. It's like, I thought Alessi did a wonderful job in cross-examination, methodically going through and saying, you know, come on, how did this hair stay on there from driving to Dighton and then back? And it doesn't really do anything for me. you know, one way or the other.
The hair is on there, so whatever the conditions were that existed, certainly it was enough for the hair to adhere to that vehicle. And what's important to note is that William Reed, Nathan Reed, the wife, and Karen went and picked up that car in awful conditions. And when William Reed went in the house at Meadows to offer his condolences, Nathan Reed was outside, as depicted on the Ring camera, getting that car ready to get it out of there. And you can see him go and wipe off the left rear tail light, but conspicuous in its absence is he walks right by the right-hand tail light, doesn't touch that area at all. Even though the conditions were so bad that William Reed wanted the Dighton Police Department to give him a ride to the hospital, they got that car out of there immediately, brought it to Dighton. When it was at Dighton, it was on ring footage being loaded into the hauler, brought to the Sally Port at 5:35. No officer would have had an opportunity to get a hair from John O'Keefe and get it to that car and plant it on that car. It's also a telltale sign of hit and runs, animal strikes, pedestrian strikes. It's one of the things criminalists look for, whether or not there's any organic hair that's stuck to the vehicle. So it's there, and I don't believe they're going to now implicate Hartnett, the criminalist, into the conspiracy.
You buying the hair?
Well, the testimony on cross-examination was the hair came off extraordinarily easily. She was able to remove it. It was not adhered in any material way. And, you know, I listened to Joe, and he's an extraordinarily powerful criminal lawyer who does defense work. What's your argument if you're the defendant?
Well, if you're the defendant...
He's turning Joe right now. He's turning him.
No, if you're the defendant, what my theory has been all along that they should be doing is just argue reasonable doubt. Don't go down the road of it was planted, because then you saw the criminalist testify today. Does anyone think that she is also capable or would put her career on the line to plant evidence to help people that were completely unknown to her? That's the problem. For the defense theory to really work, the evidence at the scene at Fairview and on the car both have to be planted, and you'd have to have lifelong public servants and civilians throwing it all the way to cover for whom?
All right. So if you go to, I don't like to talk about hair that's left people's head.
Yeah,
but overall, if you're going to go to that level, you're going to come up with a lot better than a piece of hair.
A piece of hair. All right, let's do this. Let's take a look at a video that we've been watching for years now. This is Karen Reed backing out early in the morning out of the driveway. And as she backs up, the defense theory is she backs up and she strikes John O'Keefe's car, which is parked behind her. Here's the moment. And the defense is saying that's how the taillight is partially cracked. Not fully cracked, as depicted in the pictures ultimately at the Sally Port that are taken, the snapshots that are taken ultimately, but is partially cracked in that moment. So today, in evidence, there were some photos, not of Karen Reed's SUV, but John O'Keefe's. And as we take a look at it, looking for any damage, and in particular you'll be looking on the left rear. That's the right rear, so we want to see the other side. The left rear becomes the important shot, and there it is. Is there damage? Is there no damage? If you cracked your taillight, would there be damage? How compelling is this evidence one way or another? The combination of the backing up video and now the images of John's truck.
There really did seem to be movement of John's truck when she backed up.
I didn't see it. I thought just a tap, not enough to shatter a taillight.
And I think both the hair and the taillight, particularly in a case of this magnitude that's gone on for so long, even with the jurors who have limited knowledge of the first trial, this is going through a filter at this point, and people have a leaning one way or the other.
Hopefully the jury doesn't, right? The jury's coming in fresh on all this. Let's take a listen to Sergeant Brent describe what he saw when he took a look at the John O'Keefe's Chevy.
Both from your review of those photographs and your in-person visual observations of the Chevy Traverse from all angles on that date of February 3rd, what damage did you observe to that Chevy Traverse?
I observed no visible damage.
So this is really important, isn't it? Because the ring video that you're showing was, I believe, 5:23 a.m. at Meadows. And you see Karen back up and then leave. There is fresh snow on the ground. It's pristine. You don't see any taillight debris on the white snow, which is clearly visible from the video. You now have the officer that testified today that was had access to the Traverse within 3 days and didn't notice as much as a single scratch. And look, you know, some people accuse me of being subjective in this. I see a big chunk of taillight missing, and Karen's own words said there was enough missing that she could see the light bulb inside of the taillight. So I think that's pretty powerful evidence on behalf of the Commonwealth. Well, it didn't happen backing into the Traverse. It happened before that.
But we also heard a clip of her talking about picking some pieces out afterwards, that it was pushed in, it didn't fall on the ground, so there wouldn't be any pieces on the ground. The tail light is cracked, but the piece is not completely dislodged until she dislodges it.
Did you just see her picking the pieces up off the ground after she backed into the Traverse?
No, later
like she
on.
Said? When later on?
Later on. She said later on.
That would have been filmed.
I'm just reporting.
Yeah.
I'm reporting. I'm not testifying here, Joe. Stop cross-examining me. I'm just reporting the facts here. He's always in killer mode, this guy. Always. So here it is put together, right? These are the pieces put together with one piece missing. So there's still a piece of the taillight that's missing that's never been found. So where is it? Where is that one piece? Anyone. Where is it, Joe?
It's missing. And again, so look, I don't want to take up.
Go ahead.
This is one of the things. You remember, this was charged as a motor vehicular homicide manslaughter. And I think in the officers' minds that they didn't think there was a question as it relates to the identity and as to what happened. In motor vehicular homicides, you will see they will do the car's reconstruction, they'll gather some evidence, but they don't collect it the same way they do if they think it's a murder case. The murder charge didn't come until later when it went to the grand jury. So perhaps it was missed, perhaps during the travel it fell out, perhaps
And that gets right back to what you're saying, right? A reasonable doubt case because the investigation wasn't done thoroughly.
Well,
it was investigated, it was approached differently by law enforcement.
In the totality of the jurors' deliberations, they can consider a shoddy investigation if they deem it to be so, and they can consider that in the context of reasonable doubt. But in and of itself, it's probably not enough, you know, to get the defendant there.
We're never going to know what you just attested to, that in particular instances, we do a worse investigation than in other instances. The jurors don't know that.
Well, you need an expert to testify to that, but I don't know if they're going to be allowed to do that. This is what we're going to do. When we come back, you will hear from our live studio audience here in Dedham, Massachusetts, as our coverage of the retrial of the century continues.
I don't see how John would have known about my text with Brian, and I'm not sure if he knew he would have reacted very strongly. I think we would have broken up, but I don't think John would have lost it and caused a fight. I didn't feel like John's emotions with me got really.
Welcome back. We are live in Dedham, Massachusetts, continuing coverage of the retrial of the century. That was Karen Reed in the latest documentary. It's a big change from the first trial. This jury is hearing from her selected clips by the prosecution. But right now it's time to hear from our live studio audience. Court TV crime and justice correspondent Matt Johnson is with the people. Matt.
Yeah, we have the best studio audience in live television. Thank you, everyone, for being here. Give yourself a round of applause. And they came prepared, including Stacy from Dorchester, who has a full list of things, but we get to choose one question. Yes, what is it going to be?
I have 3 good points. First of all, I want to say I'm team Joseph Krowski Jr. all day, every day. Every time you talk, I'm right there with you. I wish Nick Rocco was here because you get him every time. So team Krowski.
All right, what's your question?
Okay.
Respect Nick for what he does.
Yes, he's very passionate. Okay, so my question is, I watched Karen's episodes, and there was one in particular that I watched where she mentioned when she went to John on the lawn, she picked glass out of his face. I haven't heard anyone talking about that. My question is, if she knows he went in the house, where did the glass from his face come from? It started bleeding, she said, when she took the glass out of his face. So that's a big one for me. And
it surprised Hank Brennan during one of the pretrial motions when he was introducing these.
Right, this is a piece of evidence that wasn't a piece of evidence in the last trial. I think what the defense would say, and I think what they are going to say, is that in the fight he had a cocktail glass with him, and prosecutors will say he got hit by the SUV and the glass broke. And I believe they'll say, no, he got into a fight. He was ambushed as soon as he walked into 34 Fairview, and the glass broke that way. So
the problem with that is that statement might have surprised her own attorneys as well, because she said that she pulled a piece of glass out and blood came gushing out. That is more consistent with someone that was either alive or had just recently passed away, not someone who had been killed 4 or 5 hours earlier. He wouldn't have bled that way. So again, you know, I've shouted it too many times to count. I don't think that documentary or these constant video clips have been helpful for her.
That's one of the many reasons you don't let your client go on TV and do hours and hours.
We want him on TV.
Oh, I hear you.
All right, so our next question comes from Kathy in Amesburg. So Kathy, you've also watched the trial. I got it wrong. What is it?
Amesbury.
Amesbury. Sorry, guys. I'm from California. What's your question?
Okay, so my question is this. I know people are talking about this big conspiracy, and there's no way that everybody could be in on this. And so I was wondering what you thought about my theory as a former police officer. So all these people, I don't think are in on protecting Brian Higgins and Brian Albert. I think that this started as something small and snowballed. I think there are several of them that know each other in the Canton Police Department, along with Brian Alberts. And then you have the state police, who also work together. And I think I was wondering what you thought about my theory, that I think it's more something where it's almost a pyramid scheme. One is covering for the next, for the next, for the next. And police officers aren't necessarily going to go against each other when they work together. And it may not be about Brian Albert or Brian Higgins, but it may be about Michael Proctor, who was the lead investigator. You work with this guy, you're not going to go against him. I know that's my feeling as a former police officer.
Well, I think all of us who have worked with police officers know that there is a fraternity, and that they are very tight, and something along those lines could certainly occur. I think it's the magnitude here of what the conspiracy would involve that makes it more questionable.
But don't you think in the world we live in now, I think people are more open to the possibility of that than maybe 10 years ago, 20 years ago?
Absolutely, which means that's why you were seeing the first responders. That's why you were seeing the civilian witnesses first on the scene. That's why you're hearing from the niece, because I think most jurors would see them as outside of that sphere of the police influence.
Yeah, and I think it's hard to believe that all those people, and the first responders and all the police and the troopers, all those people would be in on it.
All right, Vinnie, so we have Jonna here. Where are you from, and what's your question?
I'm from Amesbury as well. And my question is kind of for Joe, but also the whole panel. So we have the hair today being introduced. And if the hair is so important and that stayed on the vehicle, and we have, you know, probably over 40 pieces of taillight that are on the front lawn, why are there not pieces of taillight in the skull of John O'Keefe?
Give me the 15-second version.
Well, I don't know if you can answer that, because I don't believe that they're alleging that it was a direct taillight on head collision. I think what's going to be different about, and it's an excellent question, I think stay tuned. I think the government has a retooled accident reconstructionist. ARC has been out there doing their work. Vinny's been out there on the road doing his own work in the rent-a-car. So I don't think that's the theory of the prosecution, that the rear tail light impacted the skull of John O'Keefe.
That was 25 seconds, not 15, but close.
How do you get hair on the tailgate without hitting his head?
Clothing, arm, any number of reasons.
That's a good point.
It's too implausible for you to plant it. Why
All
would
right,
you
let's
think
do
you
another
even plant
question.
it?
We got another question, guys.
How about Melissa here? Where are you from, and what's your question?
East Boston, Mass. And my question is for Attorney Kozlowski. I want to ask you the same question that was asked of Buchanan. Do you think that Michael Proctor did this investigation with integrity and honor?
So, look, I think he was protective. Aside those comments, I have been very clear. I was on Court TV last year when it happened. Inappropriate, unprofessional. But I think what I took away from that is with all that vetting and all that investigation, including the contents of his phone, there was no evidence of a conspiracy or planting evidence or a frame job.
Gotcha.
The comments were certainly regrettable. I've never, ever defended them.
Matt, we're out of time. We're out of time for this show, but thank you so much, Joseph Krowski Jr., Margaret McLean, Rick Grundy, Wayne Dennison. When we come back, I will reveal something else you need to know tonight. We are live in Dedham.
Court TV's Vinnie Politan with the latest and breaking true crime stories.
Now, let's look at the other side of all of that.
Vinnie Politan Investigates. Coming up next, only on Court TV.
Friday nights, the WNBA is on ION. Friday. The Lynx try grounding the Wings. Got it. Then the Sparks fly into the new Valkyries. Coverage begins Friday night at 7. Find ION wherever you watch. ION, it's on.
Time to reveal something else you need to know tonight. Let's take a look at the big board and what else is happening in the world of crime and justice. And oh boy, trial day 3 in the Diddy sex trafficking case. Court TV legal correspondent Kelly Craft is in New York at the courthouse with the latest from today's testimony.
Good evening to you, Vinny. It was an emotional day inside the New York City courtroom today. Cassie Ventura, the government's star witness, wiping away tears as she testified about a time when she contemplated suicide. She also testified about going to rehab. Also, a time when she says that Sean Combs raped her. The jury also viewed some still shots of those freak-offs. It was very clear some jurors had a very hard time taking a look at those still shots. At one point, some of them turning away from their screens. After court ended for the day, we caught up with Cassie Ventura's attorney.
She's holding up strong. I mean, having to recount what happened during those 10 years and beyond, and talking about her contemplation of suicide, really just very powerful.
Sean Combs' children also in court again today, as well as Alex Fine, Cassie Ventura's husband. Ventura testified that she and Combs would occasionally go to sex clubs. She was always drunk during these times because she said, "I didn't want to be there sober." Ventura said Combs wanted them to have a swingers lifestyle. She also said that she told her mother about the physical violence, but not the freak-offs. She said, "I didn't tell my mom the truth because I was ashamed." Ventura said she couldn't hurt her mother like that. Ventura also recounted the time that Combs lunged at her with a wine opener when he found out she was dating rapper Kid Cudi. She said she dated Cudi when she and Combs were on and off. Combs found out about Ventura and Cudi when he went through her phone. And Vinny, tomorrow is going to be a big day as well because the cross-examination of Cassie will take place. Court proceedings begin at 9:30 a.m. Eastern. That's the latest from here in New York City, Vinny. We'll send it back to you.
All right, Kelly Craft in New York, thank you so much. And obviously, we'll keep you up to date with all the developments in that huge trial. Right now, though, I need you to take a look at your television screens. We have a missing child who needs your help tonight. This is Zoe Petty, missing since May 8th out of Charlotte, North Carolina. She is just 16 years old. Here's what you need to do. If you see Zoe, take a look at the picture. If you see her, pick up the phone, make a call, make a difference. You can call 911, 1-800-THE-LOST, or you can call the Charlotte Mecklenburg Police Department in North Carolina. That number's on your screen right now. Let's see if we can get her to a safe place tonight. Don't go anywhere. We have another hour of live true crime. Vinnie Politan Investigates is next. In the meantime, please don't forget to hug the kids.